Hi everyone, thanks for watching. I'm Louise from The Dusty Jacket. Today we're looking at some of my favorite biographies and memoirs for adults that involve a hermit, gypsies, a chef, a young boy trying to escape, and many unforgettable orphans. Join me as I give you 5 biographies and memoirs for adults. Let's get started. Our first book is The Stranger in the Woods, The Extraordinary Story of the Last True Hermit by Michael Finkel, which I rated 4 out of 5 stars. There are 3 general groups that hermits can be divided into to explain why they seek isolation. Protesters, those who detest what the world has become. Pilgrims, often referred to as religious hermits. And pursuers, those seeking alone time for artistic reasons, scientific insight, or self-understanding. 20-year-old Christopher Knight doesn't fit into any of these categories, yet in 1986, for unknown reasons, he simply turned his back on the world and disappeared into the Maine woods for nearly 10,000 days.
Why would he do that?
By all accounts, he was the most solitary known person in all of human history, and journalist Michael Finkel was about to share his unimaginable story with the world. It is true that Knight sought detachment, but he also required food, clothing, and materials to survive in the harshest of elements. So he resorted to stealing from his fellow man.
A man's gotta do what a man's gotta do, brother.
In order to avoid detection for so long, he followed a strict set of rules about when to strike, who to take from, and what specific items were safe to pilfer. Aside from thievery, Knight held himself to a strict moral code and avoided personal contact at all costs. But in life, nothing is certain except change and death, and Knight's idyllic world would soon come to a close without either incident or fanfare. Because Knight kept no written account of his life, Finkel's book is an extensive compilation of conversations with Knight that involved 9 one-hour sessions over the course of 2 months, insights from psychologists, neuroscientists, and experts on autism, books on isolation, hermits, and solitude, and interviews with Knight's family, neighbors, victims, and local law enforcement.
That's a lot of information.
It's an extensive, profound, and gripping account of one man's desire to be alone and yet was never lonely. In his 27 years in the Maine wilderness, Chris Knight managed to say only one audible word. Looking back now, I'm sure he feels that that single word was perhaps one word too many. Our next book is Rabbit Stew and a Penny or Two, a gypsy family's hard and happy times on the road in the 1950s by Maggie Smith Bendel, which I rated 5 out of 5 stars. Born the second of 8 children, Maggie was a traveler, where working was a mainstay, horses were treated better than family, and the seasons determined where you parked your wagon and for how long.
Who lives like this?
It was a life of tradition, culture, and family. But being Romani also meant a way of life met with resistance, discrimination, and abuse. As a child, Maggie flourished in her surroundings, but as an adult, she would spend every waking hour fighting to protect and maintain a culture and people that were under a never-ending assault.
Fighting the good fight.
Maggie Smith Bendel's biography is a fascinating and rare look into the lives of the Romani gypsy. She lived within an incredibly tight-knit community that thrived on the open road. Their nomadic lifestyle brought plenty of adventure, danger, uncertainty, and joy, but also its share of mistrust and mistreatment. Maggie's words are so mesmerizing and poignant that we become immersed in her wonderful gypsy world, smelling the smoke from the family's campfire, feeling the blackberry brambles tear at our skin, and weeping as we follow a casket moving slowly to its final resting place. It's quite an accomplishment given what little formal education she received.
I mean, it's quite amazing when you think about it.
Perhaps the most inspirational part of Maggie's story was her tireless advocacy work on behalf of the Romani people and her commitment to preserving their culture. Although she could have settled for a quiet married life raising her children, she chose to dedicate her adult life to fighting for the Romani's right to own and live upon their own land, to help them acquire homes, and education for their children, and health care. Maggie describes the obstacles, defeats, and setbacks in her work, but she understood that it was the victories that mattered, as well as providing a chance for other Romani to be able to claim a little piece of this planet as their own. Our third book is Tender at the Bone, Growing Up at the Table, by Ruth Reichel, which I rated 4 out of 5 stars. Rachel knows how to tell a good story, and her storytelling skills are likely the product of having parents who could transform the most mundane event into an exotic adventure. Her cooking skills, however, were born from sheer survival, judging from the title of her first chapter, The Queen of Mold. Most mothers teach their daughters to be wary of strangers or always carry enough money to cover a taxi ride home. In Miriam Reichel's case, she taught her daughter that food could be dangerous.
Oh, I ain't gonna eat that. That stuff will kill you.
Tender at the Bone delights readers with Reichel's memories of growing up in a New York City apartment, spending summers in Connecticut, going to college, working in a collectively owned restaurant, and living in a commune. She talks about interracial friendships during the 60s, marriage, trying to please an impossible-to-please mother, and her journey to becoming a food critic. Most of all, Reichel teases us with stories about food, and more food, and shares such delectable recipes as Claritha's fried chicken, coconut bread, and Art Park brownies. These alone make it worth the read.
It sounds wonderful.
Near the end of her book, Reichel wrote about meeting renowned chef, author, and TV host James Beard. Their brief encounter was far from memorable, at least for Beard, and even Reichel admitted that she was clearly out of her depth. But little did she know that she and Beard were more alike than she realized, for food is the universal unifier and can overcome religious, cultural, or political differences while forming a bridge that connects us through aroma, flavor, and texture. Food welcomes and comforts us and provides a table big enough for everyone to gather around.
What's not to like about that?
Our fourth book is This Boy's Life by Tobias Wolff, which I rated 4 out of 5 stars. 10-year-old Toby Jack Wolff dreams of escape and freedom. He dreams of transformation. Traveling with his mother from Florida to Utah in their Nash Rambler, their prospects finally seem bright and expansive. The future was theirs for the taking, that is, if their luck changed, which, in Toby's case, seemed highly unlikely.
Don't put money on it.
Wolff's memoir is not one of those redemptive stories where everyone cheers for the hero in the end or shares a big group hug. This is another kind of story where the reader bangs their head against the wall as our young protagonist continues to make one bad decision after another, doesn't learn from his mistakes, and continually seems to disappoint everyone around him except himself. This horribly flawed and painfully real boy is the exact reason why I fell in love with this book.
That's messed up.
I give Wolff a lot of credit because he could have easily softened or even omitted certain details to allow us to have just the smallest amount of sympathy for him. Instead, he goes full bore and gives us all the ugly, raw, and sordid details of his early years, although we understand that he is just the product of a mother who is drawn to poisonous men and friends who are just a whisper away from juvenile detention. Throughout his book, Wolff explains that he craves distinction, that he only wanted what he couldn't have, and that he was merely living off of an idea that he had of himself. Although we understand and accept this, we still ache when he tries to please a parent who neither deserves nor earns it, and hold our breath and silently curse as we realize yet again another opportunity has been squandered.
You are better than this.
Through all his pain and suffering, Wolff reminds us that life is messy, it's gnarled, it's complicated. Life sometimes is just like that, especially this boy's life. Our last book is Anne of Green Gables, My Daughter and Me, what my favorite book taught me about grace, belonging, and the orphan in us all, by Lori Lee Krager, which I rated 5 out of 5 stars. What's an orphan? The spontaneous and interesting question from her 7-year-old daughter stopped Lori Lee in her tracks.
She hadn't any right to say what she did.
Phoebe had asked it during their bedtime reading of Anne of Green Gables. Like Anne Shirley, Krager herself had been adopted, as was her daughter. 3 women, 4 if you count Anne's creator, Lucy Maud Montgomery, who herself was adopted, sharing a bond of abandonment, loneliness, and exclusion. But discovering that just beyond the bend, there's friendship, joy, love, and a sense of belonging.
Never really belonged to anyone before.
Krager describes Anne of Green Gables, My Daughter and Me as part memoir and part Anne's superfan book. For devoted fans of the Anne of Green Gables series, myself included, this book serves as a fond and perhaps long overdue reunion with our beloved Anne Shirley, Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert, Gilbert Blythe, and the rest of our dear friends in Avonlea. Krager uses excerpts from Anne of Green Gables and Anne of the Island to introduce chapters dealing with friendship, bullying, forgiveness, reconciliation, love, and loss. Although society's views on adoption, adoptees, and adoptive parents have changed over the decades, the feelings Anne Shirley experiences at the beginning of the 20th century remain just as relevant today. Who can't relate to feeling not good enough, not pretty enough, not smart enough, not tall enough?
No one will never be angelically good.
Anne Shirley transcends time, region, and language to show that we all long to be accepted, respected, and loved. Anne of Green Gables, My Daughter and Me is more than just a memoir. It is a love letter to God, orphans, adoptive parents, Lucy Maud Montgomery, fans, and a little red-headed foundling who is all spirit, fire, and dew.
I am, thank you.
Well, that's it. We'll include a link to our Goodreads page in the comments section should you wish to read the full review of any of these books. And if you enjoyed this video, please click on the like and subscribe buttons and make sure to hit the bell so that you're notified when new videos become available. Again, thanks for watching, and I look forward to bringing back some old titles so that you can make new memories, because any time is a good time to dust off a new favorite. Keep reading!